New York City, 1911. In the early 20th century, America's garment industry was booming, and nowhere was that more evident than in New York City. More than 200 garment factories populated the area of Lower Manhattan, primarily occupying older, lower rent buildings left vacant as taller and more modern buildings drew businesses farther north. While those of wealth and aspirations moved uptown along with these new opportunities, an ample supply of immigrant laborers remained behind and populated these factories.
We left our own countries for many different reasons, but we all came to America to work. As we found jobs, we wrote to our friends and families in our homelands and told them of the opportunities that awaited them here. And they came for work here too.
We traveled from Italy, Russia, Germany, Greece, Poland, Palestine, and dozens of other countries from around the globe. We spoke hundreds of languages with thousands of dialects. We spoke our mother tongue at home, on the streets, and in the factories. Some of us knew English. Many of us did not. But we made it work.
But the work was hard. Often, we worked 12-hour days, 6 days a week. Sunday was our only day of rest. While we earned more money here than we could in the old country, the pay was small, most of us averaging only $15 a week.
The factories were dangerous. If we were hit on the job and needed to take time off to recover, we did without pay, and often ran the risk of being replaced by other immigrants more willing to take our jobs, regardless of how dangerous they may be.
While a strike, which included more than 20,000 garment workers, took place in 1909, it resulted in modest workplace improvements in only some locations. The more powerful factories, particularly those manufacturing the most popular women's apparel of the day, were able to resist many of the demands. And there were few garments more popular than the shirtwaist, the equivalent to the modern-day blouse. And there were few companies more important in their production than the Triangle Shirtwaist Factory.
Our factory occupied the top 3 floors of the 10-story ash building at the corner of Washington Place and Green Street.
On Saturday, March 26th, 1911, our lives changed.
Just as the bell rang, marking the end of the day, Eva Harris came running toward me in the middle of the factory floor.
Fire! There's a fire, Mr. Bernstein!
8th floor.
The fire began at Isadora Bromowitz's station along the Green Street side of the building. Someone probably tossed a match or a cigarette into his scrap bin, and cotton's very flammable, especially the lightweight gauze and linen we used. Actually, they're more flammable than wood or paper. As the fire grew from under the table, the line of patterns hanging above it began to burn. They fell on the layers of thin goods underneath. Every time another piece dropped, light scraps of burning fabric and tissue paper began to fly around the room. They came down on the other tables and fell on the machines. Then the line broke and the whole string of burning patterns fell down.
This wasn't the first time we had had a fire at the factory, but this one was running away from me. The fire buckets we had lining the walls had little effect, and when we tried the hoses in the stairwells, the fittings must have been rusted. There just wasn't enough pressure to give us the water we needed to fight the fire. I knew we needed to get out of there. Most of the girls had already started running out the Green Street exit, but I saw a group of people banging on the Washington Place door.
I was at the Washington Palace door, and all the girls were falling on me, and they squeezed me to the door, but it was locked. Luckily, I saw Louis Brown running towards us, and I knew he had a key. He pushed the girls on one side and was able to unlock the door. A lot of us escaped out of that exit, and I saw Sam running out the Green Street door, but Dana stayed behind.
I had reached the switchboard operator on the 10th floor and told her about the fire, but she had left the board to raise the alarm before connecting me to anyone on the 9th floor. All calls within the building had to pass through that 10th floor switchboard operator, and unless she returned to the phone, I wasn't going to be able to tell anyone on 9 what was happening. I stayed on the phone as long as I could, but I finally had to run. I prayed everyone upstairs would hear the alarm.
10th floor.
As soon as I got word from Diana, I rushed to find the owners, Max Blank and Isaac Harris. Isaac was in a meeting, and Max was with his 2 daughters. Mildred, who was 5, and 12-year-old Henrietta had been brought to the office by their governess that afternoon. They were scheduled to go shopping with their father after the factory had closed that day. Max and Isaac quickly jumped into action and began sending the staff down, using the elevators.
Although we had 2 passenger elevators servicing the 10th floor, there were too many employees, and the fire was growing too quickly. My daughters were too frightened to use the elevators without me, so when the elevators stopped running, Mildred and Henrietta were still with me, as were about 25 of the office and sales staff. We tried the stairs, but found both exits blocked by flames. We had no choice but to escape to the roof and hope for the best.
Once we reached the rooftop, we realized the buildings on both sides of us were actually taller than our building, and we had no way to escape the ash building's roof. Some of the stronger men tried climbing the brick walls of one of the buildings, and law students from New York University saw us, and they lowered ladders over the edge of their roof onto.
As the flames began breaking through the skylights in the ash building's roof, the last of the refugees were moved safely into NYU. In the end, all but one Triangle Shirtwaist staff member from the 10th floor survived the fire.
9th floor.
We didn't have a chance. The people on the 8th floor must have seen the fire start and grow. The people on the 10th floor got the warning over the telephone. But with us on the 9th, all of a sudden the fire was all around.
Once the alarm was raised on the 9th floor, nearly 200 of us were faced with what for many would literally become a life or death decision: how to escape.
Option number 1, the Green Street exit.
Biddy dear was crying and screaming at me for help when she suddenly collapsed. I don't know if she fainted or if she suffocated in the smoke, but I put my shirt around my hair, put my handkerchief in my mouth, and I stooped down until I came to the Green Street door, and I went down the stairway.
Because the fire started at the cutting tables along the Green Street side of the building, it wasn't long before the flames from the 8th floor reached the stairway and blocked off any access to the street from the Green Street door on the 9th floor.
I noticed a man running along the Washington Palace windows, and then I saw the flames cover him. Then I noticed on the Green Street side someone else fell down on the floor, and the flames covered him. So I just turned my coat on the left side with the fur to my face, the lining on the outside, and got a hold of a bunch of dresses that was lying on the examining table, and covered my head and tried to run. The whole door was a red curtain of fire. I ran through the Green Street side door, right through the flames and onto the roof. I think some of the others followed me. Those of us who made it to the roof were rescued. I never saw the others again.
I was a shipping clerk on the 10th floor when I heard the fire alarm. I'd just helped the boss's kids up to the roof when I heard the women running up the Green Street stairs to the 10th floor. They'd grabbed some extra clothes to help protect them from the fire, but the fabrics were lightweight and almost all of them had flames firing out behind them as they ran. I helped them discard the burning remnants and ushered them to the roof where we were all later saved.
Option number 2, the Washington Place exit.
We usually left work through the Green Street door. There was a watchman there who would inspect our coats and bags to make sure we weren't stealing anything. But I worked closest to the Washington Street exit, so I went there first. Since there wasn't usually a watchman on that side, the door was still locked.
The girls behind us were screaming and crying. Several of them, as the flames crept up closer, ran into the smoke, and we heard them scream as the flames caught their clothes. One little girl who worked at the machine opposite me cried out in Italian, "Goodbye! Goodbye!" I have not seen her since.
Margaret Schwartz was there. She tried to open the door and she could not. I pushed Margaret to the side and tried to open the door, but I couldn't. It was locked. There was a lot of smoke, and Margaret fell to her knees. The train of her dress was spreading on the floor, and I saw the ends of her dress begin to burn.
I pushed through the crowd which was near the door, and I took hold of the handle. Nothing was happening. It didn't look like there was nothing we could do to get out that way. It's when I heard the elevator arrive.
Option number 3, the elevator.
The elevator was slow, and the more people we shoved in, the slower it got. As the elevator left, we made our decision. I reached out and grabbed at one of the cables on the side of the shaft. I remember sliding all the way down. I ended up on top of the elevator, and then I lost consciousness.
I reached out, grabbed the cables, wrapped my legs around them, and started to slide down. I can remember getting to the 6th floor as slow as I could let myself drop. The bodies of 6 girls went past me. One of them struck me, and I fell to the top of the elevator. I fell on the dead body of a girl.
When I first opened the elevator door on the 9th floor, all I could see was a crowd of girls and men with great flames and smoke right behind them. When I came to the floor the last time, the girls were standing on the windowsills with the fire all around them. A body struck the top of the elevator and bent the iron, and I knew the poor girls were up there, but they were trapped and my car wouldn't work. It was jammed by all the bodies.
19 bodies were later recovered from the top of the 2 elevators.
Option number 4, the fire escape.
I worked closest to the Washington Place exit, but as I approached it, I could see a lot of people banging on the door. As I started running to the Green Street side, I heard people yelling about the fire escape. I didn't know what a fire escape was, I had never noticed it before, and we were never told anything about it. There was a row of tables blocking the windows there, but some people broke the windows, and we climbed through them onto the fire escape.
When the Ash building was constructed in 1901, the designer built it as fireproof. As a result, only a lightweight fire escape was added. The structure, with stairs only 18 inches wide, was located within the building's rear air shaft and had never been used or inspected in the 10 years since it was built.
As we approached the end of the fire escape, we realized that the courtyard at the bottom of the air shaft was completely walled in. There was no way to get out of the air shaft and onto the street, so I kicked in one of the windows and began to crawl through. I still had one foot on the fire escape when I heard a loud noise and looked back up. The people were falling all around me. The fire escape was collapsing.
As the victims were thrown, several struck on the sharp-tipped palings which ran the perimeter of the courtyard. The body of one woman was found with several iron spikes driven entirely through it. A total of 25 bodies were recovered from the courtyard.
Option number 5, jump.
I learned a new sound, a more horrible sound than description can picture. It was the thud of a speeding living body on the stone sidewalk. Thud, dead. Thud, dead. Thud, dead. Thud, dead. 62 thud deads. I call them that because the sound and the thought of death came to me each time. At the same instant, there was plenty of chance to watch them as they came down. The height was 80 feet.
One girl climbed onto the window sash, and then she dropped into space. I didn't notice if the others watched her drop because I had to turn away. Then came that first thud. I looked up, and another girl was climbing onto the windowsill, and others were crowding behind her. She dropped, and I watched her fall, and again that dreadful sound.
As I looked up, I saw a love affair in the midst of all of the horror. A young man helped a girl to the windowsill. He held her out, deliberately away from the building, and let her drop. He seemed cool and calculating. He held out a second girl the same way, and let her drop. Then came the love amid the flames. He brought another girl to the window. She put her arms around him and kissed him. They both jumped.
Up on the 9th floor, girls were burning to death before our very eyes. They were trapped behind the heavy windows. No one was lucky enough to be able to jump, it seemed, but one by one, the heat shattered the windows. Down came the bodies in a shower, burning, smoking, flaming.
Less than 30 minutes from the time Eva Harris first yelled,
"Fire!"
it was over. The fire had been extinguished and the firemen began removing the bodies.
146 of our co-workers perished as a result of that fire. 23 men and 123 women, some as young as 14.
Once their families identified the remains, 7 bodies remained unclaimed, burned beyond recognition.
Weeks later, 350,000 of our fellow New Yorkers, rich and poor, took to the streets for the funeral procession honoring the dead and to call attention to the need for improved safety regulation.
Morris Rosenfeld, a Yiddish poet, published a requiem for the victims of the Triangle Fire.
Over whom shall we weep first? Over the burned ones? Over those beyond recognition? Over those who have been crippled, or driven senseless, or smashed? I weep for them all. Let us light the holy candles, and mark the sorrow, this our funeral, these our graves, our children, the beautiful, beautiful flowers destroyed, our loved ones burned, their ashes buried under a mountain of caskets.
On April 11th, a grand jury indicted the owners of the Triangle Factory on 7 counts, including manslaughter in the first and second degrees, as well as violations of Section 80 of the Labor Code, which mandated that exit doors remain unlocked during working hours. 155 witnesses testified over 23 days. On December 27, 1911, following 1 hour and 50 minutes in deliberation, the jury returned their verdict: not guilty.